Should you set up your homeschool like a classroom in a school? No, you
Right.
don't need to do that. Listen, if you want to do that,
Mhm.
you can do that.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back today with my good friend Sharon Fisher, and I'm so glad that you are with us this week. We are talking about using traditional textbooks in our homeschooling. And this is part of our homeschool survival series. You've heard us talk about this for the past couple of months, and this is really fun because we've gotten to dive deep into each one of these kind of major teaching styles, whether it's Charlotte Mason or classical or unit studies or unschooling. And today we're talking about textbooks, how most of us grew up doing school, right? You get a textbook and that's how you learn. And some students learn best this way. I remember going to some friends of ours to their house, and their teenage daughter was she was upstairs in her bedroom, and I, asked, I said, "Where's Elizabeth?" And she said, "Oh, she's upstairs doing her, I think her history." And so I happened to pass by her bedroom, and she's just sitting on her bed, and she's got her textbook open, and she just looked like she was having the best time. And it was just a great fit for their family. And so it's part of the beauty of homeschooling. You get to do what's best for your family. And so I hope this week we can answer all of your questions about textbooks. But before we dive back into this, I want to thank our sponsor, CTC Math. If you guys are looking for a great online math curriculum, you've heard us talk about it, go to ctcmath.com, try them out for free, and see if it's a good fit for your kids. ctcmath.com. Sharon, thank you for coming back with me again today. I'm excited to talk about this. And we talked in the last episode about some of the pros of using a textbook. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and then we ran out of time, was how can you use a textbook, or can you use a textbook in a group setting? And I'm not talking about like with multiple aged kids, but in a co-op or maybe getting some families together. How would that work?
Well, this is something we see all the time. So this is definitely an easy one for parents. This is extra easy because they're relying on the co-op teacher for, um, what is needed. And so
Right.
once you join a co-op and you sign up for the classes you're interested in, obviously you want to look at the curriculum and make sure it's what you want your child to learn.
Mhm.
Because there are different teachers choose different materials, just like they do
Sure.
in school. So, usually what happens is the teacher will choose a curriculum. She'll choose the materials that she would like, or he,
Mhm.
and then you as a parent provide the materials that your child would need. And so the teacher will use a teacher's edition. A teacher might use video classes, and then any extras that she wants to teach. And it might be 2 days a week. It could be a couple days a week, where she discusses things with your kids, but they do the reading at home. It all depends
Mhm.
on the way your co-op is run.
Right.
But typically, the teacher will cover certain things, and then as a parent, you're responsible to make sure your kids have the learning done at home for the other parts. So
Mhm.
you're relying on that teacher then to make sure that they've kind of set the lesson plan out. They've
Yeah.
prepared for you when the tests are going to be. So there's a lot of relief for the parent as far as that sort of thing goes. But then on the other hand, since you're not doing the teaching, you're kind of coming back behind your kids, making sure, did you study for this? Did you prepare? Did you read?
Mhm.
Did you do
Right.
your work for the teacher? So you're wanting to make sure that that's done. But it's very easy for a co-op to do that because a co-op
Yeah.
will have the textbooks or whatever the teacher's using, and then she will assign the materials to the kids. The parents just pay for that.
Right.
And there's a number of ways to do that. You can get those through a convention or through a curriculum company, and usually there's a discount if you get them through a co-op.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that you talked about the parent looking at the curriculum first, because I think too often, especially today, we're very trusting of our co-ops and even other parents who might be teaching our kids. And I'm not saying you shouldn't trust them, but don't just rely on them because they may have a different worldview than you do. Just because they go to your church or to the church on the corner does not mean that they are going to teach from a curriculum that is going to align with your worldview. And so make sure that you know, and again, this is homeschooling. You get to guide and direct the teaching of your kids. And it doesn't always have to be you doing the teaching, but you're the one who's responsible for what it is that they're learning. And so that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk really quickly about we've talked about many of the pros, and there are a lot of pros to using textbooks. But I know that there are some perceived cons to using textbooks. What would some of those be? And
Well,
perceived is the key word there.
yes, perceived. They are perceived, and we can talk more about that another day. But a lot of people will ask because curriculum is used in in a classroom. Should you set up your homeschool like a classroom in a school? No, you
Right.
don't need to do that. Listen, if you want to do that,
Hmm.
you can do that. My granddaughter homeschools at the kitchen table because that's where she learns the best. But there are times where we take breaks and we're learning in the car and we're learning at the playground. So you don't have to have your kids with their feet on the floor and get up and do a pledge of the American flag and all the things that you would do in a traditional
Yeah.
classroom just because you're using a textbook. So again, this is a tool. You can set up your classroom however you would like to do it, and it's fine that way. So that is definitely a perceived con, and that it's not an okay thing to worry about. Another thing that's concerning to a parent is that they feel like they've got to replicate the whole school experience, and so
Mhm.
you don't need to do that. This is your homeschool. You decide how you want to homeschool, what your goals are for your kids, and again, the textbook is a tool. So, as my friend says, it's a tool. It's not a rule. So
Oh,
don't
yeah.
make that
Love that.
determine all the things that you do there. So, some people will put their trust in the completeness of the program and they don't oversee the learning. So, listen, we want you to trust the program, but not to the point where you don't know what your kids are doing.
Mhm.
You still need to know that. One of the beauties of homeschooling is making sure you're meeting the needs of your kids. And so,
Yeah.
just because it's on a workbook page doesn't mean it's the right thing. So even today with my granddaughter, we were doing a skill check for reading. And so we were going through this little exercise and she was working through it. And there were two questions in there that were not really the best written questions. And she asked me about it. And I went back and said, what would you say and why?
Mhm.
And she said, well, and it was a comprehension activity. And she said, I would answer it this way because, and I said, you know what? You're right. So even though the answer key said that was the right answer, or a different answer was the right answer, I gave her credit for it because that wasn't the best answer. And she was checking for comprehension. She was
Uh-huh.
thinking, I want to grade her on her comprehension.
Right.
So just because there's an answer key there and just because it's in black and white doesn't mean that there are no mistakes. But again, you're using this as a tool for your kids. And so be careful that you're overseeing, just like we talked about the co ops there. Some people feel that their kids might be left out because it's written to a classroom. So in a teacher's edition, it might say something like, pass one of these out to each of the
Right.
children and have them do, well, you have probably more than one child. Most people do, not everybody does. But you know what? If you do, you can adjust that to pass this out to your child, you
Mhm.
know, and your child can tell you. So even today we're talking about book reports and being able to stand up and to talk about a book report. Well, there was nobody else in the room besides me.
Yeah.
And the conversation was, could I go to the playground and talk to somebody about my book report? And I said, well, sure you can. You can tell your grandmother, we can do a video recording. So
Mhm.
just understanding that there's just because it says it in the book in black and white doesn't mean you
Right.
don't have the opportunity to be creative. Absolutely. Listen, this again, it's a suggestion.
Mhm.
Make it work for you. Don't feel like because it says there are other kids in the room and there aren't any other kids in the room that I just can't do this lesson.
Right.
But you know what? If there's a situation where you can't do the lesson, don't do the lesson. It's
Right.
okay. There's lots more of them there. It'll be okay too.
That's
Materials
a
that
great
can
point for those type A moms and type A kids who feel
right.
like they have to check every single box.
Yes, and I would have been one of those years ago.
Mhm.
I am not that homeschooler today. I can tell you that now. The other thing is you feel like you need to do everything because it's there for you. I have to do
Uh-huh.
all the things in the teacher's edition. And again, the teacher's edition is there to explain how to get a child from point A to point B. So a child who may not understand this concept by the end of the lesson, hopefully will understand it and be able to apply it. But there's all kinds of suggestions and thoughts. And
Mhm.
if you went through and did all of those thoughts, you would be sitting at your table or wherever for hours. And a lot of new homeschoolers will say, we were homeschooling for 6 hours today or 8 hours today. And then I gave my kids homework. And I'm like, why are you giving your kids homework? but you're homeschooling. You don't need to give them homework, but because the school provided homework, they
Hmm.
thought they needed to do that. So I think
Right.
for most parents, it's getting out of that mind of
Hmm.
being in a classroom. It's,
Right.
using a textbook doesn't mean you're necessarily in a school classroom. It's a little
Yeah.
bit of a switch there that they need to work to. So those are the basic ones. If a curriculum says you need to do a certain thing, can I have additional reading? Can I add, some classical books in there? Of course you can.
Right.
Can you add virtual field trips? Can you add other things? Yes. In fact, I encourage you to do it.
Yep.
And the textbook writers would encourage you to do it too, because they want your kids to enjoy
Yes.
what they're learning. So there's a lot of
Right.
freedom in teaching with a textbook. It's just sort of letting go of the notion that because it's written in the book a certain way, that that's absolutely prescriptive in how you do it.
Right.
And
Right.
over time, we learn that it's okay.
That's right. That's right. On that note, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
What we do at IEW is break through the noise of the grammar and the writing prompts, and we say, this is what you do, step by step. And I've witnessed it over and over again, both watching Andrew teach and hearing from parents, this is the best writing program. We've made it so easy and made it really affordable. So any mom can teach writing to their children using our course, and we guarantee it.
To try 3 weeks of free lessons, visit IEW.com. We are back with Sharon. You were talking about before the break, you trying to set stuff up like a traditional a traditional classroom, and parents just getting out of that mindset, and then being able to have the freedom to bring other things in, like field trips or classical literature, whatever it is. Do you find, because I know that you travel to conventions all the time and you talk to a lot of homeschooling families, do you find that overall parents who use textbooks use them across the board, like for every subject? Or do you feel like they use textbooks for some of their subjects, but not for others? What are you seeing?
There's a good mix of both.
Okay.
People who really, really, really love a particular curriculum because they can count on it. They know they've
Hmm.
had success with it. They know how to make it work for them.
Yeah.
They'll use most of it. There are some people that they'll come to they'll come to the booth like, we don't use your science, but we use your whatever. I'm like, listen,
Right.
great. I'm just happy to talk to you
Right.
about anything. So, please come take a look and see what you think. And so there are a lot of homeschool parents who pick and choose. I
Yeah.
like their English program, I like their science program. Or what they've done is they've tried to pick and choose, like I said about the reinventing the wheel, or they've took someone else's advice and then they
Hmm.
realized, hey, this didn't really work for my child. We've been using this program, and my older daughter did great with it,
Hmm.
but my younger daughter is really struggling with it. So I'm looking for something different. So that
Right.
happens quite a bit. But we don't want anybody to ever feel like, in order to use our spelling program, you have to use all the things. We think
Right.
all the things are great, but
Right.
again, you're looking for your children the way you want to teach. And so
Hmm.
it's a tool. So we see both sides. We see a lot of people using everything, and then we see a lot of people who pick and choose. And again, we're just so happy to be in anybody's home and to be able
Yeah.
to encourage a parent and to have a child learn with a biblical worldview.
Amen.
We're just thrilled about that. So, whatever works, we're happy to help you.
Right, right. And when Sharon says we, she works for BJU Press Homeschool. And so she's referring to BJU Press Homeschool because she works with their curriculum. But across the board, I think it's the same, for most of these
I think almost
curriculum
every
publishers.
curriculum
Yep.
company would feel the same way. They're just happy to be able to,
Yeah.
expose you to what they
Yep.
have available. And if
Yep.
it's something you think would work for them, for your kids, then they're happy to help you with that. And, great. Whatever you do is great. And they're
Yeah.
happy to help you. I think that's generally across the board how most of those curriculum
Yeah.
companies feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Really quickly, walk us through how a textbook is created. I would love for you, and I'm asking this because I have, our family has been to the BJU campus, and we've gotten to see from literally the very birth of a textbook to the very completion, including printing of a textbook. Can you walk us through, because it's absolutely fascinating, and I think it's something that's really important for parents to understand how a textbook is actually created. Can you take us through that process?
I can, and of course, every company is going to do it a little bit
Sure.
differently. But basically, there's a scope and sequence. And so
Mhm.
what I mean by that is what is taught for, let's say we're just talking about math. What is taught from kindergarten math through 12th grade math? What is covered across the board in those subjects? What needs to be taught? So they look at the big picture of all of math and they kind of storyboard that out and they plan that by the grade. And so I pick third grade math because third grade's my favorite. And so we'll go
Uh-huh.
with the third grade math. And
That's when math
so
is still fun-ish.
it is fun. And so, third grade, these certain concepts need to be covered. And so they look at state standards, they look at national standards, they look at other curriculum companies. We all look at each other's stuff
Yeah.
mostly to see, are we all handling the subject matter
Mhm.
appropriately, age appropriate? Is there a better way to do this? And so there's a ton of research that goes on, and so, because we're K through 12, we're looking at all the subjects all the time,
Mhm.
constantly. And so, any curriculum company, even if they're just one subject, they're looking at the scope and sequence of their whole line and going, we want kids in this grade to be able to do this. And by this grade, they need to be able to do that. So we need to work on these skills here and these skills here. And so there's a lot of pre planning. It takes a long time to plan and organize and research, and that takes a lot of dedication and understanding of the subject matter,
Mhm.
understanding history, understanding science, and also understanding that age level of learning. So
Mhm.
what a third grader learns compared to a seventh grader, so
Yeah.
knowing what's age appropriate. So they plan all those things, and then they're also going to plan, by units, by chapters, by lessons. And so in a particular lesson, they're looking at, again, going from point A to point B. Child does not know how to tell time at the beginning of the lesson. At the end of the lesson, they can be able to tell o'clock and half past. And so they're
Yeah.
looking for ways to help that child learn those things. And then what materials are needed to teach that.
Mhm.
Um, does a child need a clock? Does a child need, what questions do we ask the child? How do we assess that? Is there a test? Is there a quiz? Now we need to write a test or we need to write a
Right.
quiz. And so they're planning through all of those parts and pieces. And once all of that stuff is done, as they're working, their editing everything. And so when I worked for a curriculum company, it was a lot of fun. Everything's done digitally now, but when I was there, it
Yeah.
was a red pencil, a green pencil, and a blue pencil. And so they would go through and mark. The editors are everything in a curriculum
Yeah.
company. They check for everything. They check to make sure not only that things are spelled well, but things are age appropriate, that it's
Mhm.
consistent with your brand. They make sure the pictures fit on the page. They make sure of the margins. And so you work with the art department
Mhm.
and you as a writer decide, hey, I really want to have a picture of this in it, but I want him to have this look on his face. And so the art department looks for a picture and they have to get permission to purchase a picture
Uh-huh.
because of copyright. And so being really careful of copyright, you have permissions and editorial, and you have page layout, and you have authors, and all those people work together to create a document, a beautiful and amazing document, which is a textbook in the PDF. And so once that is done, and God has blessed the efforts of a lot of people, a lot of time has gone on there, then that PDF document goes to print. And depending on the company, that's going to depend on how they print. Now, some
Sure.
people will send it out of country
Mhm.
or to a separate place. Uh, where we were, they had their own print shop, and
Mhm.
so they could print their own materials. And in fact, now there are even cooler printers that you can print a whole book in one sitting now.
Oh, wow.
So if they're running low on something and
Mhm.
they need to pop out a whole book really quick, they can actually, it's amazing.
That's incredible.
And then there are people to bind the books and people to make sure that all the parts and pieces are where they belong. And then there's warehouse people and people who label and ship it. And it's an army of people really
Yeah.
who work together, and the main goal is to love on your family and help your kids learn. And so I hope
Yeah.
that when you order something from somebody and you open that box, you have that box day, which is such a big deal for so many parents,
Yeah.
and
Oh
you
yeah.
see
It's like
beautiful,
Christmas.
it is, you see those beautiful books and your kids are oohing and awing. Let me tell you that there are hundreds of people standing in line. Open up the beginning of your teacher's edition and look at the names there.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
my word. Something that we always did, we celebrated every time a book was published. Anybody who had anything to do with the book, anything, all stood up and got clapped
Oh
for
wow.
and had a party
Oh, did you
every
have
time.
cake?
We had cake, we had
Oh,
you
good.
name it. There was a party every single time a book went out and everybody celebrated.
Nice.
It was an amazing thing. So I know it sounds silly,
No,
but
it
maybe
doesn't.
for the parents out there, they'll realize that this isn't just a
It's not just
library
slapped
book.
together.
No, this is intentional and it's meant to bless your family. And so,
Yeah.
you know, curriculum writers are thinking about your kids. They're thinking
Yep.
about homeschool. They're thinking about how to help your kids be engaged and to love learning. And
Yeah.
so, let them enjoy those books.
Yeah. That is so fascinating. It's incredible to know how much goes into the creation of a textbook because it's one of those things we never think about. We don't think about, just like with doing this podcast. I'm certain that most people who listen to the podcast they couldn't even imagine how much work goes into all of, the production and the editing and the posting and all of that. Maybe some people do. And we love it. We love doing what we do, but it doesn't just pop up on the screen
Yeah.
into your podcast app. And all of a sudden you've got the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. And again, what's incredible about this is as we're raising our kids and we're teaching them to use the gifts and talents and abilities that God has gifted them with for his kingdom, that is what so many of these people are doing. Even the shipping department, I mean, they have to be really well organized. And so you need someone who has that gift of organization to work in that department. And their job is no less than the person who's writing the curriculum or editing the curriculum. I mean, everybody works together. And I'm talking about, Christian curriculum that's being produced today and published. Of course, there's also the other side of it. I mean, there's very, demonic curriculum that's being produced on the other side that's doing the complete opposite of what the Christian curriculum companies are doing. And so I cannot urge you more, our listeners, when you are looking for any textbook that you're using for your kids, look for one that only is from a Christian company that teaches from a biblical worldview. I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but when we went through this tour of BJU Press, the thing that stood out to me the most was that there was a whole department, a biblical worldview department that went through every single piece of what was being put out in every single book. And I know you're not the only ones who do that. There's lots of really great Christian
Mhm.
textbooks out there. But I think it's exciting and important to know what goes into them. And there's cost involved. And so that's why, when you look at all of the other, um, flavors and styles of teaching, you're looking at Charlotte Mason and classical and unit studies and stuff. I think textbooks tend to be probably on the higher end financially, but it's because all of that goes into creating those books and stuff. But it's well worth it. So we're out of time. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit about video courses very quickly, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to go through a textbook. Sharon's going to take us through a textbook and teach us how to use one. So Sharon, thank you again for joining me today. It's so fun. I love talking with you. Yeah,
Me too.
so
Lots of
exciting.
fun.
And you guys, thank you for listening. I am so grateful for you. If you have not yet watched the movie Schoolhouse Rocked, the Homeschool Revolution, go to our website, schoolhouserocked.com. Please share about this movie with your friends. We have got to get this movie into as many hands as possible. People need the encouragement. They need their questions answered. They need, even if they're veteran homeschool families or moms, we continue to get responses from those people who just say, man, this just validated what I'm doing. It encouraged me and I really needed to see this. So whether you're new to homeschooling, been doing it forever, watch the movie. It will be a blessing to you. I guarantee it. Have a great rest of your day and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
What we've got to look at is what does the Bible say about how we're to train kids? What does the Bible say about what is the educational methodology that we should use? What's the priority in education? Who's in charge of that? Who ultimately is responsible for the education of your kids?
At the end of the day, education is discipleship, and this is something I didn't understand until I was probably 3 years into homeschooling. The Bible teaches us in Luke 6:40 that when a student is fully trained, he will be like his teacher. And as we look around the culture right now, I think it begs the question, who is teaching our children? Who is teaching our children, and what are they teaching our children? My very first instinct is to protect that child, right? It is our natural instinct as parents. And yet we set that instinct aside when we send our children to school. And to me, the primary benefit of having my children home with me is I am able to impart my worldview to my children to help them navigate what's happening around them from a biblical point of view. And then we incorporate academics into it, right? We begin learning science and math and history and reading and language. And as we do that, it begins to weave a wonderful tapestry that makes our family stronger because we've learned these things together through the grid of Scripture. And when our children graduate, then we have confidence that we have taken every opportunity that God has given us to shape the hearts and minds of our children so that they can go into adulthood and serve the Lord.